Hello, everybody. The webinar will begin very shortly. We'll just leave a couple of moments for everybody to join. So good afternoon from London, everybody, but I know we have people joining us from all around the world. So good morning, good afternoon, or maybe even good evening, wherever you are joining us from. And welcome to today's webinar, which is called Transforming Taxation, Creating a Better System for Governments and Citizens. I'm Siobhan Bonita. I'm a former UK senior civil servant, and I'm delighted to be chairing this webinar on behalf of Global Government Forum, which is a publishing house that serves civil servants and public servants all around the world, and with our knowledge partner today, which is SAS. So in terms of today's topic, governments around the world are facing really strained, quite tight public finances at the time when public service pressures are increasing at a time of low levels of economic growth. So this context makes it vital to ensure that governments get tax policy right to maximise revenue, and that those tax systems need to be more responsive to citizens, to embrace developments in technology to help improve compliance and tackle unexplained wealth and fraud. So in today's session, we're going to be covering lots of issues, including things like how can governments simplify tax processes to make them easier for citizens to navigate, how to implement better data sharing across tax systems to improve tax revenue collection, and how new technologies, including things like artificial intelligence, can be used to help boost taxation compliance, but also how governments are going to have to tackle the threats from the use of AI in things like areas like fraud. We have four fantastic speakers with us here today, and in a moment I'm going to introduce our speakers and invite them each to give some short opening remarks. But once you've heard from our speakers, it's also an opportunity for you, our audience, to put your questions to our panel. So whichever device you are using, you should see somewhere at the bottom of your screen a Q&A button, a Q&A function. Please do use that Q&A function to send in at any point from now onwards your questions or your comments, and we'll get through as many of those as we can before the end of the webinar. So in terms of our great speakers today, first we will hear from Angela Render, who is Chief at the IRS.gov Content Strategy Branch at the Internal Revenue Service in the United States. And Angela has been advocating for the customer experience at the United States Internal Revenue Service for nearly a decade. She's passionate about modernising the IRS website so that everyone can find what they need, understand what they find, and use it to confidently meet their tax obligations. And Angela has more than 20 years of digital content experience. Then we head over to Malta, where we'll hear from Joseph Caruana, who is the Commissioner at the Tax and Customs Office there in Malta, where since February in 2022, he oversees the implementation of the digital transformation of the Malta Tax and Customs Administration. Joseph began his career with the Malta Public Service in 1977 and has served in many senior roles across the public service, including Permanent Secretary within the Ministry for Education and Employment, the Ministry for Finance and Financial Services, and the Ministry for Transport, Infrastructure and Capital Projects, respectively. So huge amounts of experience. Then we will hear from Sean Barry, who is Global Director for Risk, Fraud and Compliance Division at our knowledge partner, SAS. Sean is a renowned expert in fraud and integrity with a specific focus on government. He's worked for and with federal, state and local governments around the world for over 20 years, helping to foster innovative and efficient business processes through technology. And Sean specialises in tax and revenue, healthcare, social benefits and motor vehicle functions. And then last but by no means least, we head over to Brazil, where we'll hear from Adriano Sabira, who is tax advisor at the National Congress in Brazil. Adriano has experience in a range of areas, including inspection, institutional relations, smuggling repression, taxpayer service and collection, and audit. And he's got particular expertise in IT and application development. So I'm sure you'll agree with me. We really do. I know I say this a lot, but we have a fantastic, stellar panel with us here today. Please do take this opportunity to put your questions to our speakers using that Q&A function. But without further ado, I am going to head over to Angela and invite Angela to give the first of our opening comments. Over to you, Angela.
Thank you so much for that warm introduction, and I am very, very pleased to be here today. As part of the United States Internal Revenue Service concerned with the public-facing website, which is irs.gov, my team and I think a lot about making things easier for people. We think about how to use data to make good decisions and a better customer experience. Technologies like AI provide exciting opportunities. IRS.gov has over 37,000 web pages of content that receive more than 3.4 billion views a year. These numbers don't include the traffic to the accounts or the downloads of forms and instructions. United States tax law is complicated and changes multiple times a year. It applies to a huge variety of audiences. The biggest audience is, of course, individual taxpayers, but other audiences include tax professionals, businesses, and governments. Communicating this information in a way that everyone can understand and use is a challenge. We're enthusiastic to see how AI can help us operate more efficiently and provide a more modern user experience on the website. But this all really comes down to us making sure that we treat AI and technology as a tool and not some sort of magic wand that will fix everything. We must have defined problems we're trying to solve and use the tool to help us be more efficient. There are a couple of areas that I'm personally very excited about. One of those is in delivering enhanced search results on the website. The public expects the site search to perform as well as the big search engines, and it currently doesn't. In user testing sessions, we've heard from more than one person that their journey onto irs.gov starts with a commercial search engine that drops them onto a specific page. If they need more information, they will try the site search, and if the results aren't useful, they return to the commercial engine, and this is normal behavior. Irs.gov is not the only site to have this challenge, and I've done the same thing on other websites. Another area I'm excited to see AI is in a natural language chatbot available for people who want to interact with us that way. The IRS has used AI for voice bots and chatbots already, but generative AI is still on the horizon. In both of these use cases, generative AI and large language models are promising possibilities, but with that also comes the imperative that the public can rely on what the AI returns to them. There might be some industries where a 95% accuracy rate is acceptable. For the IRS, it is not. We're talking about the public trust and the possibility of an inaccuracy hitting the taxpayer in the purse. We must be sure that what the AI is returning is as close to 100% accurate as possible. I've had the opportunity to experience generative AI demonstrations trained on a sample of iris.gov content. It's a good start, and the demonstration was technically impressive. The output captured links to the source material and substantive narratives reflecting material on iris.gov. This is just the first part of the evolution, though. The next step is to make sure the output is succinct, focused, understandable, and specific to the taxpayer's question in order to maximize usefulness. This must happen before it's ready for public consumption. Fortunately, this provides another area where AI can help us, and that is in identifying pain points and places to improve. The challenge is not just in training the AI, but also in making sure the source material is usable by both people and the AI. In the research I've done, both what I've read from others and what I've seen with my own personal tests, the source material matters. Fortunately, everything we've learned indicates that if we format the content in a way that's useful for people, that's structured and tagged for accessibility, and that's written in plain, understandable language, that content will also be easy for an AI to ingest and provide to people. So as we train the AI will also be training us. The last place I'm eager to see AI used more is in customer experience analytics. As much as the AI has been relatively recent on everyone's minds, it's not new technology. A couple of years ago, we started using it to help us analyze qualitative data on the customer experience. Training that AI was interesting, and while it reduced the time it took to glean actionable information from the open-ended comments, and that was by about 25%, there was still plenty of work for my analysts. And this is all really very exciting, and I'm so grateful to be included in this conversation with you all today. Thank you.
Angela, thank you so much. That's a great way for us to kick off, because I think you've covered lots of issues that the audience will be thinking about. I'm sure you've already given them lots of food for thought. But as you say there, your key focus is how do you use technology to make things easier, whether that's for individuals, businesses, or governments, so anybody that has to engage with the tax system. And as you say, communications around what essentially is quite a complicated area can be a real challenge. I like the way you very clearly set out there. So some of the things you're excited about where new technologies like AI could be used. So helping people to search and find what they need more easily. And I think you're absolutely right that public expectations of using government sites need to match kind of what they would use with commercial search engines, using generative AI and large language models for things like chatbots. But again, you introduce the real challenge, I think, for governments that trust is key. So the answers that the chatbot gives have to be really reliable. And as you say, heading for 100% reliability, and then analytics as well, using analytics to really understand the customer experience and then feedback and improve the processes. Thank you so much, Angela. Loads of stuff there for us to be talking about and a great place to start. Joseph, coming over to you.
Thank you for the opportunity for participating in this web seminar. It is a project that has been launched by government in integrating and modernizing the tax and customs administration. In fact, it is following government's commitment to invest in modernizing and taking the revenue departments that were in the inland revenue, the VAT department and the customs department, to get together to synergize the information that they gather and the processes they can bring together to gain economies of scale into one administration in the Malta Tax and Customs Administration. So to this effect, a 3-year strategy delivering transformation has been published and is being in the process of implementation, wherein government is investing more than 100 million in the modernization of technology. And also in this strategy, we are focusing on having the standards published in the 3.0 OECD administration forum. And together, quality assurance, we have engaged the International Monetary Fund in order to be able to get the highest standards as much as possible. In that sense, we are in the process of this implementation. Next, in the sense that in the strategy that we have been published, we have made a clear vision to be an excellent and trusted tax and customs administration that collects revenue fairly and efficiently by implementing best practices, using leading technology, and becoming an employer of choice in order to protect Malta's borders and contribute to its economic and social well-being. Coupled with that vision in making things happen, we have a mission to sustain our national development when taking into consideration that revenue taxes constitute more than 80% of government revenue. Therefore, the importance of collecting all taxes fairly and efficiently through voluntary compliance, while ensuring that customs controls are effectively applied to protect Malta citizens, economy, and the environment. With this modernization model, we are embarking and focusing on the customer being the centric rather than the different tax types, but focusing on this, and it will be data-driven and also partnering with different stakeholders apart from different segments of taxpayers, also their representatives to be able to be part of this change and modernization that we are doing. We are also coupled with the modernization in technology. We have also a plan being implemented to streamline and align the legislative administrative parts of the different tax administration of taxes in order to have a one harmonized legislative system that we are embarking that in 2025 will be able to present to Parliament. And also together with that, because you can invest in technology, but if you don't invest in people, you will be able to achieve the results that you expect. And therefore, motivating the current workforce, retention of the current workforce wherein we have quite a number of experienced officers taking part in this administration, also investing in new blood in order to transform and rejuvenate our administration, both of tax and customs. And together with moving from being more as an administration wherein enforcement was the main key priority, going to a voluntary compliance. And next. Therefore, shifting our focus from to voluntary compliance, reaching out to different taxpayers through three core strategies: promote voluntary taxpayers compliance across all avenues of taxation, move from enforcement to trust building and improve communication, and the third, address non-compliance through education and awareness. These are the three pillars, the three main drivers, the strategy drivers of the transformation strategy that we have launched. In this sense, we are therefore moving to acting in real time and upfront, focusing from end to end, and therefore it is a matter of going from compliance by design, having risk compliance functions, rather than at the end of the process you get defaults or the defaulters at the end. Make it easy to comply. Therefore, that's why the focus on compliance, on moving to data-driven applications, and obviously involving taxpayers to explain the benefit of also, yes, paying taxes. It is a duty that every citizen should be able to understand and to comply without the need of being effective enforcement. The next, and therefore embracing technology is part of the whole model that we are embarking on, being client-centric, having client-centric approach rather than taxpayer approach, therefore treating taxpayers as clients to better understand their economic activities. 2, intelligence for decision-making, and therefore we are partnering with SAS for advanced analytics and AI tools to instantly identify revenue risk and to take proactive steps to address them. And the third, investing in technology, wherein we have 20-year legacy systems, different types of systems catering for different types of taxes, that we are in the process of adjudicating a new cost system, wherein we will be after a one integrated tax and customs administration system, wherein both customs and tax will be able to communicate and interact together. The last slide is thank you in that level, in the sense that the modernization that we are taking forward is around the taxpayer being more agile in using the data and being more proactive in using the technology that we are especially in the data analytics and the AI being supported by SAS. I thank you very much for your attention.
Joseph, thank you so much. And we'll come on to SAS in a moment, but just to recap a couple of key things from what you said there, the bringing together the Tax and Customs Administration to gain those efficiencies and the economies of scale, 100 million investment in technology to modernize your systems, a focus on standards, so meeting those international kind of standards. And you echoing some of the things that Angela said, the importance of building a trusted and excellent service for your citizens and your businesses that's fair and efficient. Also, you focusing on bringing in that new element of really looking at the workforce as well, the people that work in tax administration, making sure that they have the skills and the training that they need to be able to function in a modern tax system. The importance of doing all of this because it's crucial for the health of the economy. So that's something that we need to remember and keep stating. And then, like Angela's talking about analytics, you also mentioning the importance of being data driven to understand how well the processes are working. And then again, as well, making it easy for people. That's something Angela and yourself have both said, and communication being key then out to people who will be paying tax. Thank you so much, Joseph. Lots there. And we've already got some questions coming in, I see, which is fantastic. But Sean, Joseph mentioned the collaboration with SAS, so I'm coming over to you now.
Brilliant. Thank you, Siobhan. I'm going to throw a little grenade into the middle of the conversation. I don't want to talk about taxation right now. I want to talk about a different topic. So you can see on the screen, boxing. Now, why in the world would I want to throw a boxing match into the middle of a discussion of tax administration? There's a purpose there. So some of you may recognize the gentleman who is on the right-hand side of your screen there throwing the punch. That is Manny Pacquiao, Pac-Man. He is considered one of the greatest boxers of all time in the history of boxing. He won 12 world titles that spans 8 different divisions. And he had a career that spanned over 4 decades. Just an amazingly successful boxer. But why do I bring up boxing? Well, there was a reporter who once asked Manny Pacquiao, what's your secret weapon? How can you be so strong across such a long period of time in different weight classes? And he gave what I think is an amazingly surprising answer. His answer was basketball. Why would a boxer talk about basketball? He then explained that when he plays basketball, he has to learn how his opponent is moving his body. He looks at the issue and the challenge from different angles that he would never look at from a boxing perspective. And that, I thought, is a very, very good analogy for what we're going to be talking about today here, when getting to taxation. And if you can move to the next slide, which is tax administrators. What are we seeing? I have the distinct privilege of being able to work with governments all around the world at the central or the federal government, the state and provincial, the local level governments. What we're seeing tax administrators use as their secret weapon when it comes to transforming tax administration is data and analytics. It certainly is a well-worn path that many tax administrations have used data and analytics for compliance purposes for many years. But what we're starting to see are the stories that you're hearing today. Angela talking about generative AI, Joseph talking about general analytics, and I think Adriano is going to end up talking about analysis for the purposes of tax policy. This is a common theme that tax administrators on this call, I think, should understand and understand implicitly, which is it's the math, the data, and the analytics that your peers are using all around the world at different levels of government to be able to transform tax administration in the ways that you'll hear about today. Now, in the pre-call, Siobhan and I joked around about this particular slide. You can see all different kinds of mathematical formulas in the background. I want to be clear. This is not trying to make tax administrators a bunch of mathematicians. That's not what we're trying to do. Analytics has a very broad set of uses. Angela mentioned one particular one, which is very popular these days, which is called generative AI. That's just one form of analytics. Joseph made reference to the use of analytics for compliance. So there may be different types of analytical models that can be used. Analytics can be very simple in terms of an if-then statement. If somebody makes X number of euros of income, then audit them. Very simple and straightforward example. Or it could be highly complex forms of analytics that we see for customer service or taxpayer service, for tax policy, and so forth. So I think it's worth the folks on this call understanding that analytics is the secret weapon. And just as importantly, the oxygen for analytics is data. So Siobhan in her opening remarks talked about the idea of sharing of data. This is not a magical exercise in super magical data sources, but this is using the data that you have, no matter how good or poor quality it may be, to generate insights that can help tax administrators to advance. So if you can go to the last slide for just a second, I think it's worth me giving a few examples from where I'm seeing, from my perspective, of where tax administrators around the world are using these forms of analytics to transform tax administration outside of compliance. Again, enforced compliance is a well-worn path for analytics. Everybody would probably not argue it with that. It's been done for decades. So where else are we seeing stories? So if you look here, revenue forecasting, trying to get smarter about how much revenue that a government will collect so you can do better budgeting. Taxpayer service, Angela has made reference to that and has some good stories, I think, to tell. Insider threat in cybersecurity, microsimulation. There's a government that is using analytics to try to analyze when there is a tax policy change or a tax law change. Let's say, for example, the addition of a new refundable credit. What's the impact, not to the aggregate, but to every single taxpayer in that particular government? What is the impact to them, and what are the segmentations so that you can create better, more attuned tax policy to solve the needs of government and its citizens? You also see investigations management on the upper right. So looking for criminal types of investigations, identity theft. Collections optimization is also an interesting one. We're working with a client that does something called an offer in compromise. So if you've got built up debt, you can't pay the large amount of debt, you make an offer to say, I'll settle my debt for some percentage. They're using analytics to be able to automate that process, to make it consistent so that it's applied fairly across many different types of taxpayers. So those are just a few examples of where we're seeing analytics used as a secret weapon by tax administrators around the world. Siobhan, back to you.
Sean, thank you so much. I loved your first slide there. I really like that analogy that if you want to be a good boxer, you have to understand basketball. I think that's a really good way of saying you need to be able to look at things from different perspectives and understand where someone else is coming from, which is all about as well improving the kind of customer experience. So, and really, I've written down that quote that you had there, that analytics, you know, is kind of the thing that we need to be doing, but oxygen for analytics is data. So data is the oxygen for analytics. And as you set out there really, really succinctly, analytics can be used across the full range of kind of areas. So you mentioned a few of them there: forecasting on the cyber security side of things, optimizing collection, that micro simulation to really understanding how small policy changes will make a difference and impact. And then also in the kind of areas around fraud and identity theft. So lots and lots of areas where the analytics and the technology behind that is really transformative for our tax services. Thank you so much, Sean. Again, lots of food for thought. Please do keep your questions coming in, because we have one speaker left and then we'll be coming over to questions. So get your questions coming in. But now, Adriano, I'm coming over to you.
Thank you, Siobhan. I salute everyone. We will speak briefly about the tax reform going on in Brazil next. Is a tax reform and consumption taxes next. This is the recite for a good and modern VAT, but the core of our tax reform is the system. So next. We have a context. Brazil is very well positioned. We have a widespread use of electronic invoices, billions of them in the last 15 years. We have a huge, massive use of electronic payment methods, including an electronic instant payment, that we call TITS. Next. How make easier the life of the taxpayers? The heart of this tax reform is an assisted tax assessment and the massive use of smart electronic payments. Next, please. So, every tax code, every law is an algorithm. So we are translating the law into that is wrote in a natural language to machine code. So rule as a code, we have a directory, a huge text rules repository in machine code and also a text calculation engine. And every this code is shared with the taxpayers. Next. In Brazil, the electronic invoice is authorized by the tax administration. But now we wish that the taxpayer just need to care about its own business, okay? The taxpayer just records the sale, he fills the invoice, and the tax administration does the rest. It's a completely role reversal, we think. Next. So now the tax administration interprets the law, apply the rules, we calculated the tax, and we consider the VAT credits to do a smart payment. That's an advance from a split payment. Next, please. So here's a simple sample of a split payment, but we wish to go beyond this. And next. Well, in a payment only, we pay $100 for a good or a service and no VAT, as our system worked 2 days ago. So the split payment, the entire portion of the VAT is split, but what we are doing is the smart payment that we consider the credit in a real-time transaction. It's made in a cash basis, not in accrual, but it works like in a banking account in real time. Next, please. So this is the institutionalization of trust, the massive use of trusted third party, because we have this intermediation of the credit cards and the payment arrangements and the payment instruments, electronic payment arrangements. So for this reason, we are calling this a smart payment. Next. Now the tax administration is who provides calculation, assessment, information. Next. It's the end of tax refunds and tax returns. How did we get there? Get here? Well, we split the problem: tax collection and revenue distribution, as we will see in the next slides, please. In Brazil, we have 3 levels of sphere in the federation. We have the union, 27 states, and 5,500 municipalities. We are like the European Union. So we have 5, next. We have 5 different taxes, VAT-like. So we merged this in a dual VAT. Next. Well, I say dual for the sake of the federation, because the revenue is split and distributed among the federative institutions, the union, states, and municipalities. But to the taxpayer, it looks like the only one VAT, only one tax. Next. So we actually we didn't merge. We replaced the 5 tax for a dual VAT, and it will take 10 years of transition. Next. So starting in the 1.5 year and ending at the 2033. Next. And we moved from an origin-based taxation system to a destiny-based taxation system, and then you'll see in our map. The next. So, and the revenue distribution, it will take 50 years transition. That was the political solution for our country. Wow. And the next. Yeah. So we moved because, and the next, we had a difference because now the taxes remain where the customer lives. So what are the Brazilian new VAT goals? Tax just happens, as Joseph mentioned, tax administration 3.0, and no tax returns, no refund delays, and government as a platform. We are looking for a high compliance level. On the other hand, low tax disputes level, and neutrality and compliance by design. Next. And we think that we're creating a better system for governments, low cost, high compliance, low tax disputes, and for the citizens, easy, smart, and government as a platform. And before I finish, the next, please. I'll need to say that we have the massive use of data analytics during the tax reform discussion, because every difference, every different treatment that the congressperson asked us, we moved from the Congress to the computers, and we run it simulations. So the data was used to keep the system as simple as we could. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Brilliant. Adriano, thank you so much. Really fascinating to see the journey that you've been on and are still going on in Brazil. And again, echoing what I think we've heard from all of our speakers so far, the kind of one of the overarching objectives was to make the system as easy as possible to drive up compliance. And I like the way that you said it there. It's like a complete role reversal where the tax administration takes on all of the complication and the bureaucracy behind the scenes. And then for the user, it becomes a much simpler process. And you really kind of setting out the complications that you have in a country like Brazil, with all the different levels at different kind of regional structural governance levels as well, and all of that then being simplified, a 10-year transition and a 50-year transition when it comes to kind of the revenue, which is really interesting that you are clear this is a long journey to be going on. But as you say, there's some of the benefits. Tax just happens. Government's the platform on which tax happens, higher compliance, fewer disputes, all leading to a better, more efficient system. And again, reiterating what our other speakers have said, the importance of data and data analysts to really keep measuring the impact of what you're doing. But also you alluded there a little bit to also using that data and that evidence to then keep elected politicians on board with what you're doing and make sure they are clear about what you're doing and the impact of what is happening. Thank you so much to all of you. Fantastic opening presentations there. And we do have questions coming in. I wanted to pick up actually on one thing that I think, Angela, you might have answered this behind the scenes, but I want to pick up on one of the questions that came in, because it was around the use of new technologies and AI, which you've all touched on. But I want to bring in the issue of trust and AI, which all of you have kind of mentioned as well. So as this is a new technology and as you're all trialing new systems, how can you be sure that the technology that you are using is going to lead to reliable results? And what is the risk that you do create something that creates a problem where you lose that trust of the public? So essentially, how do you bring the public on this journey of using new technologies like AI in the new systems? I'm going to do the same order for one round and then we'll mix up the order a little bit. But Angela, we haven't heard from you for a while. So using AI, how risky is that? And how do you keep the public's trust when you're using AI?
The risk, I think, is in implementing something before it's ready, is really where I see it. What we would want to do is to bring it into first an environment that's not on our secure networks, kind of train it, see what it's doing, see what it's responding with, and then kind of then bring it inside and then test it some more. And to really put ourselves in the shoes of the people who would be using this technology, ask their questions and see what it responds with. I think there is opportunity to use AI and generative AI to talk to the AI and ask those predictable questions and make sure that the answer is consistent, that you're getting it back, which that's a whole other kind of interesting thing to have computers talking to computers in that area. But ultimately, we need to be sure that the source material is correct, that it's pulling from, and that it's consistently pulling from that material, and that it is not making substantive changes to what it puts out. Because in US tax law, at least, using the word is versus generally is significant. And so we need to make sure that when the AI is doing things that, and generative AI is hallucinating, it just is. If it's rewording what you said, it's hallucinating. to make sure that it's not returning something that is either ambiguous or just flat out wrong. And I think it's really going to be the testing that's important.
Thanks, Angela. Joseph, your thoughts on kind of the use of AI and public confidence and trust?
Yes, there's from our end, there's a continuous discussion between the SAS and also the officers around, making use of the data and information, so that we'll be able to define a number of criteria and develop rules in order to identify non-compliance, and testing them as we go along, getting the results. The point of it is that we are building it on a number of phases. First, on having these rules and having obvious non-compliance and therefore hitting that. But on top of that, having the results from the AI from that we have also a triage team of officers, and I'm from a director general and 2 other officers to review, and take the final decision where to post or to refer the results obtained from the exercise from the AI. And therefore, that will ensure, one, we're at this moment in time, we're testing and evaluating with past data if the results concur and if they represent a real, therefore there is ongoing reviews by the officers themselves in carrying out. And as I said, we are developing with a clear terms of reference a triage wherein a number of officers will be able to go through the results received from the AI and then decide what's the next level. Therefore, we're not relying on AI to ensure, and our message out there is, using AI, not, just using AI, but to help us be much more objective, much more real-time, compliant, and also helping us to support the same taxpayer to become compliant through his obligation.
Thanks, Joseph. Sean, would you build on that what Joseph's saying, you don't kind of replace the human with AI, but they support the human doing kind of the ultimate final check?
Precisely, Siobhan. So I mean, to answer your big question about trust, I think it's a very important question because we live in a society today around the world where there is a decreased trust in government. And we can talk about that in a political context for why that may be the case. Nevertheless, it is the case. I would suggest 3 things that are going to be best served by tax administrators in using data and analytics. One is the answer has to be accurate. Angela, you referred to that ever so briefly. You have to get the correct answer using whatever form of analytics or artificial intelligence you're going to use. Second, Joseph mentioned the word timely. It has to be done on a timely basis. Get me the correct answer when I need it. That builds trust. And I think third, it has to be understandable. Whatever the result of the analytics is, as a taxpayer, I have to understand why I was selected for audit within reason. I have to understand why I was given the advice to file a tax declaration in a certain way, or to report income or business deductions in another way. As long as I understand it. And then I think that the wild card in all that is the human touch. What most people would object to is if you get advice from a computer and there's no human being or there's no sense that there's a human being in the middle of that process, that is going to decrease the trust and erode the trust almost immediately. If the right position for analytics is to help a human being make a smarter, better, faster decision, and as long as that human being is in the process, I think trust will be attainable. If that human being is out, that's going to erode trust to the point where it may not be usable.
Yeah. Thanks, Sean. Adriano, there's a specific question coming for you, but I just wondered, did you want to add anything on this issue of AI and trust, or new technology and trust?
Yes, we think that we need to move on steps, on waves and concentric waves, like people from the lake in a virtual circle, and use the feedback to improve the next steps. So we can reach the accuracy and build trust with the taxpayers and get the results that we wish. And we need to train our AI,
Mm.
okay, in order to have to get the right answers. We in the last few years we are using a bot. We are called in Brazil the Federal Revenue Service called the Lion. So we created a character, Leo. So ask Leo. We use a bot, and it's a very almost 100% of certainty and sure accuracy. And the people use this to fill their tax returns every year.
I love that, the idea of a tax return bot called Leo the Lion. I think that's great.
Yes. Ask Leo.
Adriano, we have the question for you, and I'll invite others if they have thoughts on this as well, because it's kind of flipping trust the other way. So the question has come from John MacDonald, who has said, I love the idea of no annual tax returns. I think this was building on what you said, Adriano, that people just go pay, along the way and the tax gets calculated. But John has said, would there be a large amount of trust needed with companies and businesses to ensure they are sending government all the data for each employee? I'm assuming this type of system is reactive and not predictive. So I think John's question is, does the use of these kind of platforms, does that require more trust on the part of government as well, that people are giving and businesses are giving the correct information? And I guess the question I'll put to all of you is, do new technologies make it easier for people to scam the systems, to fraud the systems as well? So Adriano, your thoughts on the particular question?
Oh, thank you for the question, Mr. McDonald. So we have a lot of legacy systems. So actually, we will not demand the taxpayer to file their tax returns, but we will fill internally their own tax returns, and we are offering them an opportunity to check and eventually to adjust the values. And so we start to discuss and to talk actually on TIC industry, the technology, information, communication, in order to that they could do a due diligence in the algorithm, trust the algorithm, and we are sure that we will have many versions of the algorithm. So to build trust, what we are saying is that an electronic invoice that was filled and the tax was calculated and assessed for that version, you will not be questioned by the auditing. We close the file.
Right. Okay.
But if we find something like a fraud or another kind of crime, so in this case we reopen the file, but it's case closed.
Yeah.
I filled the invoice, they calculated, but the taxpayers start to say, well, it's a role reversal because I need to audit the tax administration.
Right.
So it's yes, it's a very good question from Mr. McDonald.
Thanks, Adriano. Angela, I can see you smiling there. This question of kind of digital systems and fraud and new technologies. So there are obviously benefits, but also can you see some of the challenges around a digital system in terms of potential new fraud risks coming in?
Oh, I think definitely. And that's something that we're going to be constantly working on as these new technologies are available. Nefarious bad actors, people with intentions to defraud either the government or taxpayers are going to be figuring out ways to leverage this technology to slip through our security checks, to try to slip through back-end systems, through people. And fortunately for, I think, the world and everybody here, there are people in the service who are working on this who are not me. That is not my area of expertise. But I really think that the service is putting a lot of thought into it. And there are a lot of very, very brilliant people looking after the way that nefarious actors would be trying to use this technology. I think one of the it was just kind of an aside. The reason I was smiling was the idea of people being able to audit this. And I thought that was a really interesting way of saying it.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Angela. Sean, you're smiling as well on this one. Your thoughts on kind of the overall fraud, I guess, issues in a digital system?
Absolutely. I mean, if you look, one of the oldest tricks in the books, let's say from a business perspective, would be to keep two sets of books. There's the books that I know that are accurate, and then there's the ones that I share with my friends from the tax authorities. Technology has just made that easier. In much of the world, you'll call that, say, perchance a sales suppression device or a zapper. It's a piece of software that helps you keep two sets of books that look credible, and you clearly would lower your tax burden by doing that. You can also use artificial intelligence and data to create synthetic identities or stolen identities and submit fake tax declarations or requests for rebates or refunds. It's a pretty well-worn path that the bad guys are pretty innovative. They've got incentive because they can make a heck of a lot of money by lying, cheating, and stealing. So it's only natural that the bad guys could use these same techniques against tax administrations globally.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. Joseph, did you have any thoughts on kind of digital technologies in increasing potentially the risk of fraud?
Yes, I think, as already said, but then pointed out, everything has its pros and cons, but obviously it's part of, even in the modernization we're taking part, is a part of all the ecosystem. So as much as you'll be keen on having new technology on the operational part and improving on that level, at the same time, you need to have the appropriate infrastructure and structures in place in order to detect and prevent, rather than detect, fraud in the level of cybersecurity and in that level. But that is part of the ecosystem that in our part, I mean, it also has been included when we are evaluating the new cost system that will be replacing all the legacy systems into one corporate system. And therefore, it is something that one need to give a high priority if we need to ensure and rest assured both government itself on protecting its revenue, but also the people who are paying their due fare of taxes, that there is a solid and sound environment.
Thanks, Joseph. So John's got another comment and question coming in, which I'll come to in a moment, but you did all touch on the importance of data and analytics. And Sean, I know you were joking about the slide you put up about the maths behind the scenes and saying it's not all about kind of mathematics. But I do want to get your views, all of you, on for people who will be working as tax officials in future. How does this change the skills of the people that you're going to be looking to recruit into a tax service? Are they going to need to be more analytical, or is it just that they can still be kind of maybe policy people, but they need to understand at least the data questions to be asking? So what does it mean for when you're recruiting people in to your tax departments and your kind of customs departments? Sean, I'll start with you on this one because you work with lots of organizations around the world. Have you seen that skill set shift? That's a very difficult sentence to say. Have you seen the skills that we need change over the recent years?
Absolutely. I would not say, have we seen it? I think we are seeing it and we're experiencing it. All of the tax administrators on this call certainly are experiencing it. The analogy that I would use is if you go back 30 years ago to tax administration and everybody received paper declarations and returns, there was a little bit of technology that was used to support those. Most tax administrators who were long in the tooth and experienced at that time didn't know much about information technology. I mean, Angela, I'll pick on you. Your job would not have existed 30 years ago at the IRS. And so I think you saw a generation of tax administrators come in the last few years who have had to understand technology and how it can be applied. They don't have to be programmers. They don't have to know all the bits and bytes, but they have to be able to understand the concepts of how you use computers to automate. The same is now being true of analytics, and it's happening in a faster change. You need people who are coming into tax administration who are not necessarily mathematicians or programmers, or they can write code to build algorithms, but they need to understand the business concepts and how they apply to tax administration so that they can direct and understand the strategy behind it.
Thanks,
I mean,
Sean.
Angela or others, are you seeing the same things, I guess?
Yeah, Joseph, because you mentioned training, both training of current kind of tax administrators, but also recruiting in new talent. So what's the focus for you there in terms of upskilling people?
I do agree with Sean. The fact that I believe that with the technology being data-driven and compliance by design, we need people who focus more on the taxpayer's experience, having on the front end and getting, and reaching out to different types of taxpayers. Therefore, the skills in that level, and then interpreting the results. There, when we come on collecting the data at real time, it's important that now new development, apart from having the front end on the customer's experience and combining policy with translated into administrative actions, then when it comes to the results, having the automations and data analytics, we need analytics to understand the business and be able to take objective decision based on the results and on the analysis they will be carrying out. And therefore, the shift will be much more, rather than having people who at this point in time are part of a process, there will be a shift into people much more knowledgeable in the business and people who will be able to take analytical decisions following analysis they take.
Thanks, Joseph. I'm going to come to Adriano and then Angela on this skills question. And actually, Kira Prin has just phrased it a lot better than I did, has said, what other skills do you think tax administrators will need to develop in light of the way this industry is evolving? That's exactly what I meant to ask, Kira. That was the question. Adriana, to you first.
Well, we need different levels of specialization in data analytics, different levels, but everyone or almost everyone need at least a little bit of very good knowledge of how to use this, and not to know how to use the tools, but the importance in how can I extract the best from the data using applications, interface with the data. So 30 to 40 years ago, it was the spreadsheets. 20 and 30 years ago was the database management systems. The 10, 15 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, the auditing software. But now we have in the recent years, we start to use data science in a deeper level. And now we have the artificial intelligence. So the challenge is in front of us.
Thanks, Adriana. Yeah, so not everyone needs to be a specialist, but they need to have that basic level of data literacy. Angela, anything to add on the skills front?
Yeah, I think Sean really kind of nailed it. We've been evolving. This is not new. We've had to keep up with the technology as it's happening. Some of the things that we look at in our shop are to have people who are generalists. So we have people that they understand a broad range of things at a reasonably high level. And then we have the specialists who understand things very deeply. And really what we need to do is make sure that those people are talking to each other. That way you have the best of both worlds. You have the people who have the breadth of the understanding, who can bring the various aspects into focus, with the people who have the depth of the understanding that can say, hey, wait, no, you don't quite have that right. And to really be able to check to make sure that when we see something over here and it maybe it's like doesn't make sense, that we have the person over here that can troubleshoot it and say, yeah, you're right, that doesn't make sense. There's something wrong. And that way we can check things on the back end and keep things moving forward that way. Communication really is going to be a key, and having that breadth and depth all available in the same organizations or across the organization.
Thanks, Angela. We've got a great question. I love this question. This has come from Neela, who has said, have these systems assisted with locking down on crimes? so such as those related to narcotics and evasion of taxes. So is there a feed into, for example, national security and law enforcement agencies? So I like this question because I think it's all about, do we connect data from kind of tax services with data in other areas? So like organized crime, for example, are we connecting up those the data that we're collecting across different public service policy areas? Joseph, I'll come to you first on that one.
We are in the process of defining common data in order to share more directly at real time. But at the moment, there is a collaboration approach with different regulators. Example, the Financial Intelligence Analysis Unit, and also the police force, wherein information is being forwarded on a case-by-case basis, supporting each other to work on different challenges regarding tax fraud and tax evasion from our end. But in the process, we are working together to find interoperability of the system. Therefore, what we're buying and what we're procuring and developing will be able to transmit information from one regulator to the other, to obviously to have real-time data at the hand of the decision makers.
Thanks, Joseph. And this question about sharing data is such a huge one. I mean, it cuts across all kind of policy areas, doesn't it? Adriano, your thoughts on sharing data across different policy areas?
I really like it. As Angela said, this T-shape, generalists and specialists. So we need generalists that know the institution, the tax administration, but also the economy, the industry, and it's crucial. We can't do a good job without this. And we, many years ago, about 20 years, we start to share information with the other tax administrations and public agencies also.
Yeah, thanks, Adriano.
Not internally owned.
Yeah, thanks. Angela, this might not be your area, but to the extent to which, I mean, Neela's question was, do we share information from the tax system with kind of potentially other areas where we're looking for organized crime, for example?
Again, there are people who are much better and smarter at this than I am. I think that while it can be beneficial, that we also need to make sure that we are not sharing personally identifiable information in places where we shouldn't. So we need to be very careful with what we share, with whom, and how much, that we can catch these cases, but not infringe on individual personal privacy. And like I said, this is out of my area, and thankfully there are people who are a lot smarter than me that are handling these sorts of things.
I'm coming over to Sean. He looks very smart. Sean, your thoughts on the sharing of information and the extent to which, I guess the question is more broadly about, as we digitalize all of our public services, does that help us to connect all of these kind of data sets up in a way which is helpful for government?
Well, let me guys first start with Siobhan with the basic premise. And what I would suggest is that government in general is the most prolific collector of data in the world. If you look at tax administration, if you look at motor vehicles, at healthcare, at economic data on businesses, customs, for example, government collects data on all different types of entities, and it is certainly not data poor, but it is, I would say, insight or information poor. And so data can be important, but I would not suggest that more data is always better. The right kind of data is better in a very prescriptive and narrow sense. I mean, a data scientist might tell you, hey, just give me all the data in the world and I can go figure it out and sort it out. And there's a little bit of truth to that. That's fine. But at the end of the day, I think tax administrators would be very well advised to understand what data do you need to provide better tax administration, and go very narrowly and focus on those data elements, not necessarily even the sources, but those data elements within a source. to get the biggest bang for your buck. So it's not magical data, but there are certain data elements that can be super helpful in tax administration.
And on that note, Sean, I'll stick with you for a minute because John has put in another question, which is how do governments make sure that they are checking the quality of the data and making sure, for example, that outliers like the COVID period doesn't skew AI, for example, going forward? I think this goes back to Angela's point that you have to be sure of the source data is really high quality. So your thoughts really on the quality of data and how much of a challenge is that for governments?
Sure. So I guess a really quick unscientific poll. Angela, Adriano, Joseph, would you please raise your hands if your data is perfect? Okay, let the record show. Nobody raised their hands. Every tax administrator, every government, every public or private sector entity in the world has some crap data. Let's just call it what it is. And I think what you have to do is recognize the what's good in the data, what you can use and what you cannot use, and simply use what is reasonable and necessary to use. So data quality is always an issue. I mean, a little bit of the question of what I understand from John asked, COVID necessarily didn't bring bad data. It just brought different behaviors in data. So there's perhaps a mixing there of two things. It's actually, I would say it's an interesting social experiment to see the differences in the changes in tax behavior during COVID, because it might represent the real behavior of taxpayers and citizens. But sometimes you just get poor quality data because it's self-reported by taxpayers or because it just comes in from bad sources or unreliable sources. So data governance, data management, understanding where it came from, what its sources is, how it can be used. I think that would be my advice, is just robust data governance. Nobody likes to talk about it because it's boring, it's dry, but you gotta have it.
Thanks, Sean. Angela and Joseph, I'm going to come back to you on the quality of data, your thoughts on data quality. But Adriano, there's a question here which was to you specifically because it was talking about split payments. So the question was from Ross Angela, who said, will split payment be mandatory for all operations? I think that's a very specific question for you.
No, split payment will not be mandatory, but the buyer has the option of collecting the VAT from their purchases, because the law links the right to VAT credit to the proof of payment. Why? Fraud. Here in Brazil, as we can, you can open and start a company in 1 hour, and in the same day you start to issue the electronic invoices. So we have the invoicers, companies that are fabricating, producing VAT credits. That's fraud. So for this reason, and also to have a low level of tax refund or immediately tax refund, the legislator, so the congresspersons decide to link the VAT credit to the proof of payment. So it's not mandatory, but I think that will be very massive use. It will be used every day, I think.
Thanks, Rosangela. So we've only got a couple of minutes left. I can't believe how quickly this conversation has gone. And I do want to come back to Joseph and Angela about the quality of data. There is a question from Alicine who has come in. This has taken me way out of my comfort zone, and I'm not sure it's entirely on point for today's conversation. It's about governments using cryptocurrency. So I'm going to say, if any of our speakers do want to answer that, feel free to type an answer to that one if you like, or you can raise your hands and answer it now. But I'm not sure it's entirely relevant for today's conversation. But Joseph, just any thoughts from you on the quality of data and how governments make sure that the data is of high quality?
Quality is key for any data that you receive. Otherwise, if you don't have quality data, you have an issue. Obviously, all data has its challenges, but obviously the challenge is that we get real-time data from third parties directly from source, in order to be able to not to get bad interpretation on that level. I think it's a matter of consistency on having a structured, uniform way of getting the data, and the timeliness and the response of that data. But we are relying on third-party data. The tax administration in Malta has a great source of data coming directly from, and therefore will relieve the taxpayer from the need of providing that data. But it's all a matter of consistency of having that data evaluated, also gone through to a structured format in terms of quality and also and timeliness of that data being received.
Thanks, Joseph. And Angela, we started with you, so I think I'm going to finish with you. I know you have touched on the importance of the quality of data, but anything else you want to add on how do governments make sure that that source data is of the highest possible quality?
I did want to say that it kind of depends on which data you're talking about. So I deal with data like the quality of the content that we're putting out, that it requires eyes on it, multiple eyes on it from different perspectives to make sure that we're making sense, but also that we're accurate, those sorts of things. But when we're talking about some of the data that we use in order to analyze that experience, that is going to inherently have stuff that's in it that's messy. But the volume of the data that we get, like I said, we've got billions of views of our content a year. Once you get into that aggregate, it can kind of wash out some of the inconsistencies that would cause us to make poor decisions based on that data. So from my perspective, it really depends on which data set you're talking about. Is it source information that's going out? Is it the individual taxpayers' data? Is it usability metrics that we're getting that we would look at in aggregate? So it's really, that's not a great answer to your question, but I think it really depends.
Yeah, it's the reality though of there is so much data out there. I think it just goes to show as well, it's back to data is so much, it can be so many things, and I think there's still a long way to go before lots of officials and public servants understand all of those different types of data that we are using. Thank you so much to everybody. We are now out of time. I think that was a fantastic conversation. I wasn't sure how a conversation about taxation would go on a webinar like this, but I found that really, really interesting, and I can't believe how quickly the time has gone. Thank you to the audience for sending in so many great questions today. We have sent out a very short questionnaire to the audience, so if you could take a couple of minutes just to complete that questionnaire, I'd be hugely grateful. It means that we can keep giving you the webinars that are of most value to you on the topics that you really want us to be covering. If we haven't managed to answer your question here, I think there's some more coming in. We will try and do that behind the scenes, but just to say to our fantastic speakers, we've got people saying thank you so much for the webinar and for your great presentations, and I echo that from me. So thank you to Joseph, to Angela, to Sean, and to Adriano for giving us so much of your expertise today. Thank you to SAS for being our knowledge partner as well. To everybody who attended today live and who has registered, we will be sending you a link to the video. So if you missed any of it or you want to share it with your colleagues, you will be able to do so. And we will also be producing an article with the key points from the conversation that we had today, and we'll be sharing that with you in a week or so's time. That just leaves me to say a huge thank you again, and wherever you are, enjoy the rest of the day, and I hope we will see you on another one of our webinars very soon. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.